Higher Education Department is being blamed for failing to resolve problems faced by students at institutions under their ambit. Students at the country's tertiary institutions have been protesting over funding and other issues. Yesterday, Wits University released a statement condemning a violent incident where students allegedly marched on the Vice-Chancellor's house and threatened to burn it down. Let's now discuss this with Ishmael Mnisi from the Higher Education Department. Mr. Mnisi, good morning and thank you very much for joining us. It's quite worrying, I must say, that year after year we still have student protests after the fees must fall protests 8 years ago. It's as if, for some, stakeholders are working in silos. You've got NSFAS that's capping accommodation funds without consulting perhaps with the property owners how much they're charging. Universities want to begin the academic year while some students are waiting for appeals with NSFAS. What do you make of all that we're seeing now?
Well, thank you very much for having me. Firstly, let me indicate that it has been the Minister Zimande's well-held view that consultations are part of his leadership style, that, he has consulted extensively with various stakeholders before and even after the commencement of the academic year. Now, in as far as the academic year is concerned, the Minister has been consulting various stakeholders since last year, November. We have met the leadership of SAUS, we have met the leadership of University South Africa, we have met Labour and various organizations that are organized within our sectors in order for us to deal with these instances of various concerns that students will be having. Mm-hmm. Now, numerous agreements were made, including on how should we, deal with issues of accommodation, the issues of, fees, and also, various issues that relates to the management of our institutions. Now, it is incorrect to say that the department must be blamed because of it is not consulting extensively. However, we do not know that what then takes place when we have met with the student representatives, whether do they go back and discuss it with amongst themselves in various institutions so that the feedback that we get, we then on time we can look at it. However, from what extent, we are consulting extensively and we are continuously doing so.
Mr. Mnisi, can we perhaps break down this conversation into parts and confine ourselves to perhaps accommodation at first? On the conversation around accommodation, I take it you consulted extensively before the academic year got to start. What did you resolve? Because NSFAS here was saying they're capping it at 45,000, and we've listened to the students, the SRC members. They've stated that it's not possible. There are many student accommodations that are actually registered with NSFAS that charge more than that 45,000 a year. So what had you resolved when as stakeholders you met?
Well, there is what we call the guidelines that we release every year on registration, including accommodation. These guidelines is what NSFAS uses primarily to fund students. Now, we consult our institutions in as far as those guidelines are concerned. Now, all these agreements that are contained in the guidelines have been well canvassed with all the institutions, with all the student leaders. Now, in as far as the issues of accommodation is concerned, it is amongst the many issues that we have agreed on, which relates to the management of students and the allowances that we pay for them, because we do pay transport allowance, we do pay accommodation, we do pay tuition and personal care allowance. Now, we would not have arrived at that decision to implement those had we not agreed with the student leadership. But having discovered that there are instances of challenges and acceptance of some of these guidelines, Minister Zimande met with the University South Africa, which represent all the VCs, to form a committee that will look at the issues of the capping of the accommodation to 45,000 rand. However, we have arrived at that determination following numerous investigations that we have done and international benchmarking, and we came back to discuss with the student leadership and with institutions as to this amount. So it is well canvassed, and we were believing that all is well up until we discover that there are instances where some students might not have been informed on time in as far as this is concerned.
With those properties that are charging more than the 45,000, I mean, it's easy to ascertain that indeed there are those that are charging that amount. But beyond this, would there be a possibility of removing them then from the list of accredited property owners who offer rental for students? Because if you guys want to stick to 45,000, it's either you force them to toe the line and charge a bit less, or get those that charge less, or you increase the funds at this point.
Well, the committee that we have constituted will look at various options that we're having. Amongst those options, is for the institutions that are affected to apply to NSFAS, indicating the reasons why should we, top up on top of the cap that we would have made. But secondly, I must indicate that there are instances where we have picked up that there are instances of price collusion by some of the private accommodation landlords, and we have requested the Competition Commission to actually join us in our effort to try to investigate further this suspected collusion in as far as private accommodation is concerned. However, we have also picked up that within some of our universities, there are those that are charging even above the cap, and this is the reason that we've engaged with our institutions for them to make a representation to us so that we can look at the cost factor of what actually constitutes the prices that they've charged, and particularly in areas in our metropolitan areas. This is where we are sort of experiencing exorbitant accommodation prices. However, we are willing to work with all our institutions, including the private accommodation providers, for us to arrive at this at the price determination. Let me also indicate that through NSFAS, we have now begun the process to accredit all our private accommodation providers. There are rules and protocols that we have indicated them. So annually, we'll be assessing whether they comply with them for those that are agreeing to work with us. So we are now regulating that space, which for a very long time, it has not been regulated. So we are alive to that reality that we need to regulate this industry because it is escalating the prices. And at the end of the day, the children of the working class and the poor are the ones that must pay those prices. So this is the reason that consciously so, Minister Nzimande said that NSFAS must lead our stint in making sure that this sector is completely regulated and is completely managed in order for us to manage the price escalations.
These are most certainly commendable moves, but what happens in the interim? Because it seems the academic year is continuing now. That's the part where we were saying it seems as though stakeholders are working in silos. You have lodged a complaint with the Competition Commission, you're pushing ahead and you're in talks with NSFAS, but what must happen in the interim?
Well, we have looked at concessions that have been made by various, universities, including Wits, in order for them to come closer to the, demands by students. And we think some of the issues that they've considered too are quite reasonable. So we want to appeal to all our institutions to find a localized solution to the challenges that have been raised by the students. And we want to call upon all the student leaders where they've disengaged from negotiations to come back, meet with management, engage, and agree on the way forward. Because all that we are interested in is to make sure that the academic year commences. However, it must commence with all the stakeholders, being comfortable, and particularly making sure that the issues that are outstanding currently are being amicably resolved. And I must also indicate that for our department, we are working on a comprehensive student funding model, which will be implemented in 2024. And we're hoping that a number of these challenges that we are currently faced with will be dealt with, particularly the issues of the missing middle students, who at the moment are not, are financially needy, however, are not currently funded by the NSFAS funding policy. So we are hoping that all these challenges or the majority of these challenges that we are currently faced with will be dealt with when we are looking at the comprehensive funding model.
Mr. Mnisi, a number of student representative members, SRC members, have been suspended. Your views, or are you looking perhaps to intervene there? Because in most instances they're saying they're actually being silenced in this respect because they don't represent themselves, but the vast students who would be looking for accommodation. Even the president at Wits stating that he in fact has graduated and has a job offer. So it's not in his interest to be protesting, but he's doing that for the next generation.
Well, one of the issues that we need to agree on are the rules of engagement between management and students, because it is unfortunate that you would see a protest being led towards a resident of a VC. We expect that discussions and protests must be confined to a central place of meeting, which in this instance it's an institution. That's where we expect such engagements to take place. Minister Nzimande has said it before that we really need to relook at how we engage within the sector, and we are supporting that view that such a discussion must take place very soon. In as far as the issues of suspensions, each and every institution in our country has its own rules and regulations, and we believe that the leadership of the students, they know those rules, and management also have an obligation to protect the institution's property and that of the private individuals who are there. And we want to, in dealing with this issue, that both students and management must find each other and be able to understand where the fault lines are and deal with such fault lines at an institutional level.
All right. And then just in closing, on the barring of the media, where do you stand on that one? Because a number of our colleagues were manhandled while trying to capture what has been happening, particularly at Wits University.
This, as the department and government, we support media freedom. That media must be given an opportunity to do their work. We do not support any barring of the media by any. So if there were such instances where the media was barred from doing its work, we really condemn it, and we want to appeal to our institutions not to interfere with the fourth estate.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mnisi. That was Ishmael Mnisi from the Department of Higher Education. More news on the other side of this break. Do stay with us.